the left and the lawfare created scenarios like we've never seen here. To your viewers, I don't think he's going to be sentenced to prison, but we've seen a lot of crazy things over the last few years.
Can you give us the latest on this court battle between Donald Trump and Alvin Bragg?
Sure. So tomorrow or Friday, here in the U.S. in New York, there's going to the soon-to-be president is going to be sentenced by the state court judge. Now, his team has filed for emergency review. That they call that process a writ in the United States Supreme Court. Essentially saying that because of the immunity decision that came down about 6 months ago, this state court judge has no ability, no right to sentence President Trump to anything. So that's kind of where we are. It's going to be, this is unprecedented territory for all of us here. And I think this is a great example of when you try and distort a well-established process in order to effectuate a political goal, you end up with chaos. I was a prosecutor for a long time, and there's no way we would have ever brought a case like this, because one of the things you're looking at is to ensure that if you were to get a conviction, it would be upheld on appeal. And this was just, it was a beyond ridiculous process from the start, and I think that's why we're seeing ridiculousness at this point.
Alvin Bragg is arguing that he wasn't president at the time that this crime took place, and there can only be one president at a time, so presidential immunity isn't relevant or doesn't apply here. Do you think that will persuade the Supreme Court?
No, he knows that's not what this is about. What the issue is that there was the immunity decision of the United States Supreme Court was a lot broader than just the facts occurred when you were president. It also involves evidence that was adduced or evidence that was created during the time of your presidency. So, for example, when Hope Hicks testified to certain conversations she had during the time President Trump was president, that evidence should not have been in front of the jury. So that he knows, look, this was a political witch hunt from the outset. He's at the point now where he's having to argue anything. Just after the recent subway case that he just lost, his credibility is at an all-time low.
Where do you think the Supreme Court will decide on this? Obviously, it's a 6-3 conservative appointed court. Does it look likely that President Trump will win his case?
Well, I think in the long run, he's going to win the case. Whether the court decides that, there is no ability for this court to hold a sentencing hearing tomorrow I don't know how the court's going to rule on that. I think it's important for your viewers to understand that anytime an issue comes before the Supreme Court, one justice looks at it first and determines whether there are viable issues potentially for the court to hear. And in this case, in New York, the justice that will look at this case is Justice Sotomayor, who's part of the liberal wing of the United States Supreme Court. So it's going to be very interesting. I don't know. If I were to guess, I'm guessing that there will be a sentencing hearing tomorrow. I don't think he's going to sentence the soon-to-be President Trump to anything. The real question is whether or not he will attempt to try and retain jurisdiction, meaning power over the soon-to-be president. And if that's the case, we are in a whole new world that some little state court judge thinks he's going to hold power and hold sway over the president of the United States. I can't even imagine where that goes from here.
What does that mean practically, holding power over the president?
Meaning what it means is that the court would hold jurisdiction, meaning, so let's say hypothetically what we do sometimes and what I've seen done here in California is, you commit a crime. What people need to realize, there's 2 steps to the sentencing process or the conviction process. One, you admit you're guilty or you're found guilty, right? And so there's a judgment of guilt, okay? The second phase of the judgment portion is sentencing. So it's sometimes what happens is, your client goes in, they admit guilt, but the court may say, okay, I'm going to continue in sentencing for a year, don't do anything bad, and when you come back here, we're going to dismiss the case, okay? During that year period of time, the court is exercising jurisdiction over the defendant. So in this case, think about this for ridiculousness. He doesn't sentence him to anything, but he retains jurisdiction for 4 years until after his presidency. But in the meantime, Alvin Bragg decides that he thinks that President Trump did something to violate a law. So we got to bring him back and sentencing him on the other case. That's retaining jurisdiction. That is a joke, and that's not going to happen. And I can tell you the Supreme Court would shoot that down in a nanosecond for violation of separation of powers.
And just to be clear to our viewers, there is no chance, is there, that President Trump will go to prison? Obviously, he was convicted on 34 counts, but there is no chance he is actually going to face jail time.
Well, you say that. I believe that to be true. The judge has said that, but I mean, I'll be honest, I wouldn't put anything past these people at this point. I don't anticipate that, but if you had told me 3 years ago that a former president of the United States would be prosecuted for a case like this, I would tell you we're crazy. So, you know, the left and the lawfare created scenarios like we've never seen here. So we're in a whole new world. But to your viewers, I don't think he's going to be sentenced to prison, but we've seen a lot of crazy things over the last few years.
When he becomes president on January the 20th, what do you think President Trump and the Republicans should do to hold people like Alvin Bragg accountable if they are using so-called lawfare, if they're going after their political opponents using the legal system unjustly? Should they try and hold them to account using that very same legal system?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think you saw in Georgia, where we had the Fannie Willis case, that the Georgia legislature created a legal process where there's a review for prosecutorial misconduct, and that there's a board that can assess whether or not the allegations, the complaint of the individual citizen were valid, and then there could be a removal. We do that here in the state of California with judges who have violated their oath. I think that's one process. I think prosecuting some of these prosecutors for violation of civil rights, which we saw in the 60s. It's so funny how things change over time. That could be another process. But I do think it's something that we have to drum out of the legal system, using these tools, which, you could make the argument that we saw something similar in Great Britain, where people were being prosecuted for posting their concerns on social media that were not consistent with the party in power. This is something that needs to be stamped out. In Western civilization, the Anglo-American legal system, the respect for the rule of law and using restraint has been central. And I think the left is pushing the envelope on that. And we've seen that here and in Britain.
Do you think that when President Trump leaves office in 2029, the left will go after him again using lawfare? Are they just sort of waiting their time, abiding their time, and they're going to try and put him in prison in 4 years?
That's hard to say. I think it's interesting. We'll see how the next 4 years develop. If you were to ask me, if their state of mind is the same as it is today, yeah, I think they will. I think they have shown every indication that they will. I think you have to understand, so for anyone who is questioning whether or not this prosecution in New York was politically motivated, whether or not there was any interaction with the Biden White House, any of those things, I very few people have talked about this, but I want to just kind of talk about a hierarchy within the legal system here in the States, okay? So I prosecuted cases originally in federal court, and then I was a state prosecutor. In the legal hierarchy, lawyers consider working in the federal system as far more significant, far more prestigious, far more impressive, okay? Federal prosecutors look down on state prosecutors. The fact that an individual from the Biden Department of Justice, not just any federal department, but from the Department of Justice itself, left and went to the Manhattan DA's office shortly before the prosecution of President Trump began, that in and of itself is a massive red flag indicating potential intersection between the Biden White House and Alvin Bragg's office. You have to understand that, and I've never heard anyone really talk about that. It would be like someone, I can't even think about something similar in Great Britain would be, but it would literally be, you would never do that, ever. The amount of pay is different, the significance, the prestige, not even in the same realm. So in answer to your question you just asked me, the left has hated him and were willing to do anything and everything to prevent him from being president again. We'll see how things develop over the next 4 years. But it's a major problem in this country, and we need to get a handle on it.
Thank you for watching this video. If you want to watch more content, please subscribe to our new GBN America YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.